Okay, so hi everyone. I'm delighted to be here again with Sue Kientz, an amazing American astrologer, author of More Plutos. Please go and check out her website and her book. So hopefully lots of you saw the previous video that we made introducing dwarf planets. Today we're going to talk more on dwarf planets, but we're going to look through the lens of the Aries Ingress. So it's a bit of a special podcast today, so to speak. So we're going to talk about a huge amount of information today. Hopefully we'll get through it all. But if not, we can always make a follow-up or a sequel if that's what people would like.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we're going to talk about today. This is the chart of the Aries Ingress set for London, which is, you know, sort of, I'm in the UK, so it's just an automatic go-to to set charts for London. But, you know, this could differ depending on the locality that you're in. And we will be looking at different locations throughout the talk. So we're going to get through, like I say, a huge amount of information. We'll have a sort of exploration of the Ingress chart itself. Then we'll look at the dwarf and trans-Neptunian planets, their orbits, their location in the solar system, a few keywords and some, you know, a bit of insight into them. Then we'll look at the UK and the royal family. We'll look at the US and the elections, which is going to be a massively hot topic going through the year. We're going to have a quick look at China and Taiwan, the US reproductive rights, Israel, Hamas, and then Ukraine and Russia. So there's a lot to get through. So let's just start with the Ingress chart itself. Okay, and like I say, this one's set for London, but we will be dipping into other geographical locations. So the first thing that jumps out at me with this, it's the big elephant in the room. We've got Pluto newly ingressed into Aquarius, forming that long-term square with Haumea, a fixed square. That is the big elephant in the room, I think. You know, and this is the first of around 13 squares that we're going to have, which they started in 2022 in the late degrees of Libra, and then they're going to run right through to 2027. And this is a sort of real long-term, you know, background evolutionary square that we've got going on. You know, it's fixed and it's air and water. But the moon in the Ingress chart forms a fixed T-square. Okay, there's a lot of pressure building up with this, which is going to manifest in various different ways, I think. And it's important to note in this Ingress chart, the moon is out of bounds, okay? Which means the moon is, you know, above the normal declination that would expect it to be within, and it's kind of acting on its own. It's not going to be following any rules, so to speak. It's acting almost like an unaspected planet. So the moon could go a little bit wild here, perhaps. But I think what it's going to signify as well, a big theme about women in power. I think we're going to see women in the headlines, and for various different reasons. For example, the US reproductive rights, or, you know, women coming into power. I'm just thinking of the UK, and Queen Camilla's stepping in for Prince Charles a lot. So there's a very strong feminine theme going on here, I think. The other,
and of course,
Sue,
you
go
know,
on.
yes, the two other square years that we had squares, 22, 23, those were in the cardinal signs, and that's when women were losing their power. The first set were all about the Roe versus Wade
Exactly.
overturning. So I think as Pluto is moving into Aquarius, this is going to be more empowering, more liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, Pluto and Aquarius is about a more diverse use of power. It's power to the people rather than power to the goats at the top of the mountain, isn't it? You know, it's about a fairer share of power. Whether we actually see that, because Pluto and Aquarius can, you know, has a lot of potential to be quite extreme and quite right wing as well. So it's not necessarily going to be a smooth ride, but it is very much about people wanting the power. And of course, the moon in mundane astrology is about the people. It's about the mood of the nation. So yes, it's about, there's a very strong feminine principle with the moon, but it's about the people in general too. Yeah. So I think there's a very strong theme here about power to the people. People have had enough, haven't they? Had
Yeah.
enough of all the goats at the top of the mountain, which is that very Pluto Capricorn type energy we've lived with since 2008. Yeah. So the other thing that jumps out at me is we've got Orcus opposite Saturn. Okay. And we've got Venus conjunct Saturn there as well. And you know, Orcus, you know, you say this, Sue, it's about perfection and organization and cleanliness rules. It can almost be a little bit obsessive, can't it? And I just,
and it is a conservative, and it's a conservative body. It is a like a Saturn object. So this is double Saturn in
yeah,
some ways, just
rules,
to
rules,
mention.
rules,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'm just, when I look at that opposition, what comes to mind is Israel and Gaza, and how there's this obsession with cleaning out Gaza. It's like we need to clean Hamas completely out of Gaza. So that comes to mind. We'll look at that in more depth later, without a doubt. And then, of course, we have the cardinal square of Maki and Kwawa, in those cardinal signs. Um, this is this is quite a long cycle, isn't it? It'll be about 288, 300 years, something like that. Massively long.
Yes.
But I think these two planets together, we need to explore this in more depth, certainly. But we've got Maki, who, can be like the higher octave of Uranus, and can be these like really forward thinking, almost considered crazy people, but just brilliantly clever. But can be so, but we can also have the shocking side of Maki. And then Kwawa, perhaps about sort of being risk taking, that type of thing. And I also associate Maki with the potential for extinction and barrenness if we don't take responsibility and sustain the resources that we have. So, I think there's potential there for behavior that's outside the bounds of normality to have positive consequences, but also very, very destructive consequences at the same time. And again, we're seeing that in Israel, aren't we? And I think what we also need to keep in mind that very shortly after this ingress, we have a lunar eclipse on the 25th of March, 5 days after. That's at 5 Libra. Followed by a total solar eclipse at 19 Aries on the 8th of April. And then 21st of April, we have that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction exact at 21, 22 Taurus. So I think this Aries ingress is just setting up the scene for a really busy, exciting, wild spring. I really do. What do you think,
Which
Sue?
I think that, yes, and I mean, just offhand, I'm thinking Jupiter, Uranus at 22 Taurus, that has to be right opposite King Charles' sun, I think. Isn't that correct? Or
It is,
little,
yeah, we're going to
okay.
be looking at that,
So
yeah.
that's I mean, that can be very good too for because Jupiter squares and oppositions are not bad. And Uranus and Jupiter, they're very good friends in that sense. They can be very beneficent together.
Yeah, I think so. Very much about breaking free and finding a way to sort of do things in a new and progressive way and breaking out of a rut. You know, this conjunction is happening in Taurus, which is quite happy to actually sit in a rut as long as I feel safe and secure. And it's something, like a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is needed to sort of get things moving. It's like a breakthrough, isn't it? And
Yes, it
there's so
is.
many situations in the world, and we need some form of breakthrough to just break through where everything's stuck. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this conjunction. I think we need it. We do need it. And I think a lot of us have felt stuck for so long, haven't we? You know, with after the Saturn Pluto conjunction in 22, COVID lockdown, and I think a lot of us have got stuck in a rut, personally and collectively. So yeah, we need this. We need this. But I always say with Uranus as well, we never quite know which way it's going to go. So I think we'll see some wonderful surprises and innovations, but I think we might see some shocks and at the same time. I think we need to sort of be
It's
ready
always
for
a mixed
those.
bag,
Yeah, exactly. I think we need to be ready for that, don't
sadly.
we? Definitely. Okay, so let's move on and look at the royal family. Okay, so as we know, King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer. He's undergoing treatment. You know, hasn't been in you know, he was only crowned last spring, wasn't it? So, you know, hasn't really been in the role formally for very long at all. And he's going to step back from in-person duties, but he'll still be doing sort of, you know, office work and behind the scenes duties, so to speak. And Prince William will no doubt be taking up more responsibility, but it's interesting that his Queen Camilla's taken up more responsibility too. But at the same time, the Princess of Wales, Kate, she's off duty at the minute. She's been in hospital for surgery and she's having a long recuperation. We don't know what that is, to be honest. But what we have here is, if you think to that fixed square in the Ingress chart, that falls right across Charles's ascendant and descendant. We've got Charles' natal chart in the inner wheel there, and the Ingress in the outer wheel. There we go, and that's forming, you know, that Ingress moon Pluto Haumea square is forming a fixed ground cross with his natal moon in North Node. So there's a huge amount of pressure and, you know, crisis going on in King Charles's life, isn't there? You know, there's pressure on his family, his health, his general constitution. You know, that transit Pluto's conjunct the ascendant, but from the 6th house, which is all associated with health. And we've got Haumea down in the 4th house there, opposite the moon, and it's just shouting out all those family themes. But I think with Pluto square Haumea, this is something that's been building for a long while. There's been pressure building for a long while, hasn't there? Unseen, behind the scenes, and whether that's the physical health issue he's got, but all the personal issues as well. You know, there's a huge amount of pressure here, but again, we're seeing that the moon theme echoed about, you know, women stepping up to the plate and women becoming empowered, perhaps. But I find it really interesting how Maya is conjunct his nodal axes and his natal moon. So I think this is a very, very pivotal point in his life, in his life journey going forward. So, but I was looking at Saturn, transit Saturn there, which sorry, I thought I had that marked up. We've got transit Saturn, and that's been going through his 8th house for a little while now, and it's conjunct Venus, and we know he's having these difficult, you know, relations. He's separated from his sun, isn't it? You know, Saturn Venus is about perhaps the separations within relationships, but Saturn rules the 6th house of health, from the 2nd house of vitality there. And like I say, it's been transiting through Pisces, through the 8th house. And from a medical point of view, the 8th house doesn't pertain to good health. You know, it's linked to excretion and the colon and the excretional organs and the reproductive organs like genitals and the groin. But Pisces, you know, can be about repression of feelings and a weakened immune system and feelings of disappointment. And I think that that Venus Saturn does feel quite disappointed, doesn't it? It's like a lack of support. And so I think there's probably a huge emotional underlay, especially with so much moon involved in this Grand Cross. And as we know, that the word disease is dis-ease, and there's so often that emotional underlay. And we know he's had sort of family problems for a long time. But you know, we've got Haumea and Pluto there, you know, about regeneration, transformation. So I believe, we're led to believe he's going through chemotherapy, and which is a very Plutonian thing, isn't it? You know, chemotherapy is a poison and it kills what's, you know, making the person ill. So it's using a toxin to kill something that's toxic, isn't it? So very Plutonian. So yeah, there'll be some form of regeneration, I think, hopefully physically, but I think certainly within his family dynamics and within his public role. You know, we're looking at his moon north node in the 10th house there. It's very public. And I think one thing that's wonderful, it shows how the royal family is progressing and transforming, is he's announced this, he's made it public that he's got cancer, which the royal family wouldn't have done a long time ago.
It's a huge thing. Yes.
It's a huge thing. And, you know, we just look at that Leo moon. Leo's a sign of the royal family, you know? So a huge step forward for the royal family to announce something that publicly. Anyway, I wanted to just show you his directions. So I set his solar arc directions for the same time as the Aries Ingress, which is quite interesting. And I looked at his directed north node there, right on top of his natal Maki in the 12th house, Cancer family. You know, the 12th house, it's, you know, it's everything that's hidden and private. And it's the house of confinement as well. And, you know, in some respects, he is confined away from his public roles. But I think this is going to be his direction going forward. And I wouldn't be surprised, you know, that this direction's last, you know, it's a long-term thing. You know, it's going to be over the next year or so. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some shocks to come or surprises to come, certainly around his public-private role. You know,
I think he's made a positive about the shock. You know, I think he knew that this was going to shock the British people, and yet he then decided to turn it around and say, I want more people to realize this is normal, and we're, you know, it's good to know you have a problem, and good to go to the doctor, and this is curable, and he's normalized something very unusual. So maybe that's part of the Maki going on, but he's made it into a useful thing, a good thing for his people.
Yeah, and of course, in doing so, he's taking care of the collective, because he's probably encouraging normal people to go for checkups. And you know,
wonderful.
It is. And the 12th house there, the 12th house is a gateway to the collective. It's a very collective place. So I think that, yeah, that element there too.
And it's easy for him. This is all trying his son. This is easy for him. It's
absolutely.
Exactly. Oh, sorry, did I steal that from you?
No, absolutely. It's picking up that
you were ready.
I know. But the thing is, he's got directed Saturn, which is coming very, very close to that sun. So he's taken responsibility for his vitality and his own health, but taking responsibility for his role as a leader, you know. But I do wonder, when that Saturn exacts and gets a bit tighter, whether there might be some restriction, further restriction on his role, that type of thing. Because what also, I don't know if concerns is the correct word, but also makes me think he's got directed midheaven right on top of his natal Uranus. So I think he's definitely going to have a change of course, without a doubt. There's a lot going on here.
Apparently everything seems to be coalescing around this being a major issue, but I don't feel that this is you know, something to be unduly worried about. I think this is his first great challenge of his reign, and he's making lemonade out of it.
Yeah, hopefully. And that midheaven on the natal Uranus, it might just be about changing up the way that he carries out his public duties and his public role. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. There just could be a huge change up in the way the system works, type thing. But what I thought was really interesting is this is his solar return for 2024 November. So it's his next solar return. And there's a lot of angular stuff going on here. I thought that was really interesting. So for some reason, my arrows have not properly come up. There we go. So firstly, the solar return is always about the sun. It's the heart of the chart.
Sure.
His sun is right on the ascendant there, but from the 12th house. It's in the 12th house, and it's opposite Uranus. And that kind of echoes that Uranus midheaven type feel that we just saw in the previous chart. We have Orcus right there up in the midheaven, with Saturn right down there on the IC. So we've got another very strong angular story going on there. And there's got to be something about duty and responsibility tied up in that, without a doubt. And we also have a fixed T-square of Mars in Leo, Moon, and Haumea and Juno. And I did wonder that Mars in Leo, Mars is about younger men. So I just wondered if that was something to do with William perhaps getting more rights to lead, that type of thing. But what's interesting with that moon down there, Charles's natal moon's at 0 Taurus. So this solar return contains a lunar return. So I think November is going to be quite a pivotal time, and it's going to be a new cycle in many ways, with a solar return and a lunar return. So I wonder.
He's had a good support though with Venus in Capricorn on that opposition. Just mentioning, there's an easy opposition for that Haumea Juno opposite moon from the second house.
Yeah, because Venus is trying the moon. But again, there's a feminine theme there. Moon and Venus, it's about the feminine. So I just wonder if more's going to get passed to Camilla, or I don't know, maybe he's, forgetting about Prince Anne. Is Princess Anne going to step up and take more responsibility? There's definitely a very strong feminine thing going on here, without a doubt. But some solar returns you look at and it's just like one of those kind of average normal years. I think this is a very significant solar return. I really do, and probably worth studying in depth in a separate sort of discussion, all of it. So so I think it's going to be a very pivotal year for Charles and the royal family. And just before we leave this subject, I thought I'd have a quick look at the UK chart with the Aries Ingress, because whatever happens with the royal family is incredibly impactful on the UK itself. They're tied together inextricably, aren't they? Yeah. So we can see that fixed T-square of the Ingress, that elephant in the room in the Ingress, picking up the UK. This is the UK 1801 chart, picking up that Jupiter in the 11th house, that Jupiter in Leo, which signifies the royal family, that royal leadership. It signifies the House of Lords. It's a very sort of strong political, kind of thing. So there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, there's a lot of rumblings about the House of Lords needing to be modernized, revolutionized. You know, it's got Pluto right opposite there. So I think we might see the slow beginnings of change in our British political system, perhaps. They need to evolve, without a doubt. They're archaic. They are absolutely archaic. What else do we have? So we have Maki Maki still close to that ascendant. The identity of the Great Britain will change in line with the changing identity of the royal family, without a doubt. Like I say, they're so tied in together. But we've got Quawa down there, you know, forming that square with Maki Maki, and it's picking up the UK sun.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is a huge challenge to the tradition, the very structure of the leadership of the UK, you know, political, royal. You know, look at the shocking behavior of many of our politicians. You know, it is. So I think this has got to be about how sustainable are the structures that have been around for centuries and centuries. I don't think they're sustainable any longer. They're really not.
No, change
Uh,
happens. It has to happen.
yeah, and we need these big planetary energies to bring that about. It's not just going to be a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction by itself that brings about historical change. It's got to be these bigger outer planets. Yeah. And the last thing I found sort of really interesting there, it's transit Neptune on the UK Quawa in the 6th house in Pisces. Oh, you just have to look at the state of the National Health Service in the UK. You know, it's a very Pisces 6th house type theme, isn't it? It's absolutely, it needs dismantling and completely rebuilt. It completely needs a completely new what reality. It really does, because it's you know, it's not based in reality anymore. It's completely and utterly swamped. It's drowning. It's really, really drowning. You know, 12-hour waits in the emergency rooms and waiting lists of over 2-3 years. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a continuing theme for the UK. Do you have any thoughts there, Sue?
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not as familiar with what's going on in the health system through my mother somewhat, but she has not had. Maybe it's in the part of the country she lives at just south of Manchester. She's really always been very pro national health, although she has had some comments so that I was aware that it wasn't everything that was it hoped to be. But I can see that would definitely seem to indicate there'll be something going on and some maybe better technology, because the one thing about quaoar, it also can be experimental.
Yeah.
So some need to take a chance, a gamble at some new thing, and that could also be what's going on here with the Neptune contact.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, they're going to have to come up with some new model, without a doubt. So,
yeah.
yeah, fascinating. So, I've talked for quite a bit there. So, shall I pass over to you?
Okay. So I was just going to talk a little bit about the dwarf planets, which Leanne has already spoken about, introducing you to Haumea and Maki Maki and Orcus. When I talk about the dwarf planets, I know some people are really resistant to adding new objects to their charts. And so I like to tell people you only have to you really should just think about adding the largest dwarf planets, or the most important ones. One is not as large as some of them, but it has a very slow orbit. And so we're talking about Haumea and Maki Maki and Sedna and Eris. Those are the VIPs of the dwarf planets. And so just want to give you an idea of what we're talking about, where they're at. And this is representing the fact that all of them are farther out than Pluto. And Pluto, you might be aware of, is in the Kuiper Belt, right after Neptune. And then you have Haumea at uh, a, a few tons of years after that, as far as its orbit. It's 283-year orbit, and Makemake is farther out than that at 360-year orbit. And then you have very distant objects with Eris, which is as big as Pluto. It's like a twin of Pluto, and Sedna, which is about half the size of Pluto, and it's way out there. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. Makemake and Haumea are about 2/3 the size of Pluto or Eris, that size of Pluto, the Pluto type size. But these are very big. They're very consequential, and they really show things as serious as life and death, and that's why you really want to be using them. As I said, these other ones on the right have larger orbits. Eris is, you see, has even a huger orbit than Pluto, more eccentric than Pluto. And then Sedna has this ridiculously large orbit, and that's why, but it's coming in, as you see, for a close approach to the solar system, and it's actually moving faster than Eris. It's quite extraordinary, but it packs a punch. Now, that's very well and good to know about where they're at. In fact, this is the Kuiper Belt here. These two are outside of the Kuiper Belt for the most part, although Sedna will get close to the Kuiper Belt, and Eris does almost get into the Kuiper Belt. It actually can be sometimes faster than Pluto, and that's how eccentric its orbit is. But I'm sure you want to know what they mean, and just generally, they have basic meanings. Pluto, you already know about. It's power and control, and just trying to, whether this is control having money, or control having a position, or control having charisma. We all understand Pluto very well. But there's other things about power that you need. Is, can you make change? Can you fix things? Can you heal things? Can you create things? Those are all change values, and that's all about Haumea. And then, in a more intellectual bent, you have Makemake, which is kind of the ability to amaze people, either by being very smart or being very unpredictable and shocking, and maybe even a mad genius. As Leanne was saying, there's been more traction about my estimation in 2015 when I wrote my book, that Makemake is like a higher octave of Uranus. And what does that mean, you might say? It's like, just like Uranus, or how is it different from Uranus? And one of the examples that I've been using is the fact that you have the United States of America has Sun sesquisquadrate Makemake, and of course it was founded out of a rebellion, out of a revolution. But what does that mean? Is how is a Makemake revolution different from, say, a basic revolution that of Uranus? And what that is different is, instead of there have been rebellions in history for centuries and millennia. But when the United States broke from Great Britain, the difference was they didn't bring in another strongman. That's usually what the rebellions were all about, that they would just change who was the king or who was the top leader. In fact, George Washington was offered the position of king on this new country, and he says, I don't want to be a king. And so they decided on a whole new magnitude of different government. And that's what makes Makemake different. Is just like an invention like the telephone was a great a change, a great revolution. That was very Uranian. But you have an iPhone where it just doesn't make phone calls. It does everything. It's just an order of magnitude different from a regular invention. And that's a Makemake invention. So that gives you an idea of the difference we're talking about. when we say that Makimaki is kind of like a Uranus, but something so much more. And just to give you this basic words to help you understand Sedna. Sedna is a very persistent and determined and long-suffering kind of body. It's like Saturn and Neptune all rolled into one. So that's where you want to kind of think of it. You would want to know where another Saturn is, or where another Neptune is in your chart. Well, ball them all together, and you really need to know where that body is. And so that's why I think you need to use Sedna. And Eris being the antidote of Pluto, whereas Pluto is, a lot of times people with Pluto negative aspects, or even positive ones, or conjunction to a personal planet, they can be very overbearing and trying to suck the oxygen out of things, and bring all the power to themselves. Eris challenges that and says, you have a lot of power, but we have a lot of people on our side. We have community, and we will match your power and defeat you in trying to take away rights, or take away our land, or whatever the thing that Pluto person is trying to do. That's really what's happening with Ukraine against Putin. Putin is definitely a Pluto type, and the Ukrainians are bounded together, and then it's together with the European Union, United States. This is like an Arisian community. So these are the 4 planets that are really very, very important to know about. And another thing you might need to know, because you might have wondered why I was breaking this up into these 3 rings, is because these rings are safe zones in the Kuiper Belt, where actually very large bodies are orbiting. And so Pluto has some mid-sized companions in Ixion and Orcus. You heard about Orcus earlier, with Leanne mentioning this this body of order and rules. And it's what the funny part about these bodies that are in these rings with these larger Pluto, Haumea, and Makimaki is they seem to share the same type of meaning. Where Pluto wants to control things, so do Orcus and Ixion in different ways. Orcus wants to make rules that you will obey, and then that person can control you, that Orcan type person. Whereas Ixion people, they want to break rules. They want to change the game. And the interesting thing is, the inner planet is kind of a conservative version of what we're talking about in the control ring, and the outer body orbiting is a more Uranian, a more revolutionary of character. So we're not going to be talking about all of these mid-sized bodies, but as you know, we're mentioning Orcus. Ixion will probably come up, and Quaoar, which is also on the larger side of the mid-sized ones. It's like the 5th largest in the Kuiper Belt. Is somebody who tries to change the game by playing and pretending and gambling and maybe pranking you and getting the better of people, rather than being so upfront and make or break, as Haumea is, can be uncompromising. One of the very negative things about Haumea is the fact that if it feels really stalled in what it wants and it cannot change things, it will there are certain individuals that will do the worst thing. They will kill to make change the game. Quaoar won't do that. It's more like it'll give you a drubbing at sports. It's less serious, but it's still a good to know. And Varuna on the inner side will just lie. It will story tell. That's much more conservative thing to do, a much easier thing to do. To change the game, to change the narrative, and also in the Makimaki ring, you have people who can envision things that are invisible, that will actually give more ideas and more knowledge, which seems hard to believe that can bring more knowledge to use just your imagination to learn things. and Edison is a nickname I have for 2002 AW197, because some of these bodies are not named, and maybe will never be named. We have to think of nicknames, and it's a body that comes up in your chart when you might take a new direction or go to a new path. So these are all really very they give such dimension to charts that we need to know about it. But you might also wonder why we have this these another reason why we have these rings here that I wanted to show you about is oh, I'm sorry, before we get to what I was just thinking of, Eris does also have its own companion as far as its orbital distance from the sun, and that's Gong, which is has a similar orbit, similar size orbit, and yet it has a very different operation. It is, instead of being very disinterested with other people, less emotional with other people, that Eris is. Eris is always really calculating on how the community is going to operate in concert to get things done. Gong individuals are more compassionate and sensitive, and maybe sometimes too sensitive. So that's another body that's relatively large, along the sides of Quawar, which is again a little over half the size, over the Sedna size, which is kind of right about half the size of Pluto. But there is yet even another ring that's between Pluto and Haumea's ring, which is a minor ring with a smaller Sedna-sized main body, unnamed MS4, I call it 2002 MS4. But that's a whole other series of dwarf planets that describe what it's like to be between, like, a rock and a hard place. You're suddenly caught between somebody that's very powerful and other people that want you to change, between control and change. And that's when you really kind of say, I've got to regroup. I've got to figure out what to do. I don't know how to handle this kind of pressure. And that's when you have you will be having a transit perhaps of RN43, to hesitate, to stop, and then evaluate, which is MS4, and Salacia, which we will talk about in this in these future segments, right, that are coming up, is about, you have now gotten your information and now you can speak up, you can embark and let go, move forward. Salacia is very helpful, and which I think you'll find that. And so this is one way of showing you what's out there. It's probably overwhelming. You might have to think about that. But if you go to moreplutos.com and click Meet the Dwarfs, you can see all these dwarfs listed there with keywords and links to any articles I've already written about them. And there's even some of my book chapters. So you can really dig down in that. But I felt that for you to really understand this presentation as well as we want you to, you really need to have some background, some idea basically of these plants, since we're talking about them. And so back to you, Leanne.
No, I love that schematic. It makes so much sense, and I love the control, change, and amaze themes. That's wonderful. And there's just two things I want to comment on there. So Haumea, you said when Haumea gets stuck or stalled, it can sort of kill almost. And Haumea is a double-edged sword. It can be incredibly creative but very destructive. Definitely has those two sides. And the amaze bit where you have Maki, that's incredible, because I was thinking back to around 2004 when Maki was in a square with Pluto, yeah? And what we had then was massive technological and communication innovations. So Xbox was released in 2001. Bear in mind that the orbs of these planetary aspects last a long time.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Facebook was founded 2004, YouTube 2005, Twitter 2006, iPhone 2007, all coinciding with that evolutionary square of Pluto and Maki, amazing us with these new technological things which we now just take for granted.
Yeah,
So
that's
imagine
very
what's
true.
going to come, because Pluto and Maki are going to be making a trine by sign, aren't they? And they're both in
Yes.
air. Yeah. So that's just going to speed up the evolution of technology. I think it's beyond what we can even imagine, to be honest.
Well, it's one of the good things. When the last opening square of Pluto and Haumea happened, and this is talking about at the time of Roman emperors. This is why
Mm,
these slow bodies have huge, huge cycles. But at that time, Maki was actually in a square opposition with Pluto and Haumea, and that's why things were very bad. We're going to be very much more lucky because of the trine for Pluto, how Pluto Maki, and Pluto being trine Sedna.
mhm,
The last time Pluto was trine Sedna was down when the Salk vaccine was distributed in 1954, the first vaccine program to get rid of polio. So this is a time, that's why we have suddenly had these the COVID vaccines completely developed and deployed in just a year.
mm.
Um, Whereas that took many years back then in the 50s. But it's a great time.
It is, and things are just going to be so rapid, so rapid.
Yes.
Acceleration beyond anything. So
Exactly.
yeah, certainly exciting. So let me share my screen again. You see that? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So what I want to talk about now is China and Taiwan. I think they're incredibly significant topics in the world right now, aren't they? And they're rumbling on, and yeah. So let's have a quick look at these. So I've got the 1949 China Communist chart in the inner wheel, and then the Aries Ingress in the outer wheel there. And again, we're sort of focusing on that massive fixed square that we have going on. And you can see that falling right across China's ascendant. You know, this is an angular T-square. It's very, very significant. And it's picking up the China moon along with the ascendant there. So I think there's not only going to be a lot of internal pressure from the people themselves, you know, there's probably a lot of change needing to come from within. There's going to be international pressure as well. You know, look at that moon on the descendant there. So I think foreign relations are going to be massively important. You know, how Mayor's falling up in the ninth house there of foreign relations. But if you look at any of the news coming out of China, the housing market's not in a great state. You know, we've got a huge moon theme going on here. Moon's about homes and houses. That the financial situation in China is not great at the minute either. And you can see
Mhm.
there we've got that Moon Saturn opposition to Orcus. Um, you know, picking up the
On a
China
Saturn.
Saturn. So it's having a Saturn half return there. So that they're going to have a cleanup of the financial situation, I think. But I think this is very much to do as well with the absolute obsession about Taiwan being owned by them. You know, there is an obsession from China, without a doubt. So I think that's going to keep playing on and keep playing on and playing on. And it's going to be a pivotal thing going forward for the rest of the year, without a doubt. And if we look at the chart of Taiwan, with the Aries ingress, you know, Taiwan obviously see themselves as an independent state. China sees them as a breakaway province that still belongs to them. Um, we can see that T square from the ingress picks up Taiwan's Ceres. Okay,
Mhm.
so there's a whole bunch of Moon Pluto dynamics here, and Ceres in shadow form is very Moon Pluto. It's like that toxic mother who won't let go of their child,
Mm.
and China is like that parent who will not let go of its child, i.e., Taiwan. You know, that toxic mother. Um, we've got, what else did I want to note here? Yeah, I haven't got it sort of ringed up, but if we look down at Ceres there in the Ingress chart, it's right opposite Taiwan's Haumea, across that parental cardinal Cancer Capricorn axes, again echoing the power dynamics between that control and parental figure that's China. So there's huge pressure here. I do think this is like a bubbling volcano, without a doubt, without a doubt. But you know, that Leo Ceres of Taiwan, that sees itself as an independent identity. It's Leo. And if we look here, I should have an arrow somewhere. There, I've got an arrow there. You know, I didn't put the China chart around the outside because it was going to get a bit messy having the tri-wheel plus all the dwarf planets. But the China ascendant and moon, you know, fall at 3 and 5 of Aquarius, right down here where Pluto is, opposite that Taiwan Ceres. Ceres are going to keep fighting for their own autonomy and own independence, and to sort of still be that independent state. They want their own identity. They don't want that parental control of China. But if you see these other angles I've got here, we've got Kwawa down there. See that little, looks like a little stick figure, right on top of Taiwan's sun, the leadership, the government, the very roots of Taiwan. So I think there's going to be some firm boundaries needed. Without a doubt. You associate Quora with that risk taking and gambling, don't you, Sue?
Yes.
So I don't know what the leadership might do, but what makes me think is we've got the North Node there approaching Orcus and Aries. Taiwan's Orcus. You know, of course, Orcus was the god of the underworld, you know, a punisher type thing. So, you know, there's a lot of focus on fighting for independence here and not being pulled back into that sort of relationship with Taiwan. You know, so, but ensuring it's got to be sustainable. You know, if you look, we've got Maki there. We've got Kwawa and the sun, and it's forming a cardinal T-square. So I think there's going to be so much, you know, action and activity from Taiwan about maintaining its autonomy. And I really do think it's going to do whatever it can to stand up to China. But I do wonder with the seventh house being triggered very much, if it's going to it's going to continue needing international support. You know, it's on very good relations with the US, of course, isn't it? So I think we're going to continue seeing a lot of activity in that area. And of course, you know, if we look at Jupiter-Uranus conjunction falling on Taiwan's 8th house sun, they're going to continue fighting for freedom. You know, they don't want to be controlled or give away any form of autonomy. So
do you see the Jupiter on the Saturn to be a positive? I mean, you know, that's just the only question I had.
Well, the reason that the way I see this Taurus stellium, Taiwan's Taurus stellium, we've got Saturn, Moon, and Mars is incredibly autonomous. They're very much in charge of their own resources. You know, they're incredibly productive nation. They're very self-sufficient, very Mars, Saturn, and Moon. And I just think there's going to be an increasing, I think Jupiter's just going to increase that need for boundaries and autonomy. So they're almost, I think it's going to increase their determination. We're talking about fixed planets here. They're in Taurus, they're fixed. And it's just going to enhance their desire to maintain that sense of, you know, separation from China. And perhaps about sort of, you know, finding new support to help them do that, new ways, perhaps even new legislation. against China, I don't know, but it's going to keep rumbling on. But there's a huge amount of pressure building up
Yeah.
over this. But I don't think Taiwan's going to budge. You'd hope it
No,
wouldn't budge.
I don't think they could. I don't think
No,
anyone wants to let them give up. You know.
no, 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 no. So I think that there's going to be a lot of support, and we've got Jupiter and Uranus there, and again, it just could be new sort of financial partners and new, you know, we're just thinking about the China situation in Taiwan. That Jupiter Uranus could be about massive new innovations coming out of Taiwan as well. We're so fixated on the highly pressured and volatile news that we're fed every day. I think
Mhm.
sometimes we get a little bit tunnel vision, don't we?
Mhm.
Especially when
Mhm.
there's so much fixed energy going on around us.
Mhm.
And we tend to forget, there's other stuff going on. Countries are growing in other ways, or they have other issues apart from the volatility from the neighboring nations,
Mhm.
So, yeah, yeah. But I just think this is quite a strong chart for Taiwan, to be honest. I really do. So, yeah. I'm not quite sure how to read that North Node on AUKUS there.
Yeah.
I don't think my
Um,
insight
well,
quite runs deep
I
enough.
think that especially with the order and the trying to perfect things is going to be of most important because that's the other side. This other thing of with Orcus is it's trying to understand by breaking things apart and categorizing, and I think that they're very good at that. They're very very process oriented
Yeah,
in Taiwan, and that is just going to be maybe they can break apart this whole problem and try to figure out how to approach China in ways that will stop the aggression
yeah,
and
yeah,
go more for cooperation.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I do think AUKUS is quite like Virgo energy on steroids almost, isn't it? It's
Yes,
supercharged Virgo.
very 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 true.
Yeah,
Very
energy.
useful.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, an Aries energy is about new innovations. It's about, just sort of going ahead and finding new paths and what have you. So yeah, finding new ways around the situation, perhaps.
Yeah.
But again, it might not all be about China. It could be about, just like I say, new ways of I don't know. It could even just be new financial collaborations, anything of that. So, and of course,
Yeah.
Taiwan's an incredibly technological country anyway. So I wouldn't
True.
be surprised that they're pioneers. Ah, there we go. We've got that Aries North Node there. This could be about pioneering new technology. Yeah,
Hmm.
so that type of thing. Anyway, so that was just a little dip into China and Taiwan. So shall I pass back to you, Sue?
Sounds good.
Yeah, because I'm dying to hear about America.
Okay. Um, so uh, very much on everyone's mind in not just the United States, but throughout many countries is what is going to happen with the U.S. election. And we again have this rematch brewing with Donald Trump against the incumbent Joe Biden. So we'll just jump right in and see what's going on with that. And we're going to look at Donald Trump first. Um, First, and we want to look, of course, at what's happening here in the upcoming Aries Ingress, basically looking at what's transiting in his chart. And here we have his, well, first off, I did realize I had to mention, I have slightly different icons. Like this is Sedna up here at the top, which looks a little like Saturn or an upside down partial Neptune, but that's your Saturn Neptune. So it'll help you remember about that. Orcus, my Orcus, it looks like ORC, but it also looks like a little figure. And typically, since I started before a lot of these icons were created, I've always used capital letters for the largest dwarf planet. So you'll see Maki is an M down here in the second house. Uh, and Haumea is an H. And Quawar and Ixion are Q and IX. And I have sometimes ventured into icons, like for Gong is in the seventh house here, a crying heart, because that's the compassion, that's the sensitivity. And Salacia, which we looked at in the minor ring we were looking at earlier, is this talking head, getting started, starting to speak, starting to act. It looks a little like Pac-Man, but sorry about that. And I think the Eris is familiar to everyone because that's been in use for a long time. So now that you know what's going on here with my symbols, the first thing I think we have to notice, which I kind of already showed you, is Sedna is dominating his 10th house. As we know from what we hear in the news and as we watch these candidates, and Donald Trump is kind of in trouble, and most people are saying he needs to be president. He needs to be president because there's a lot of legal actions against him, and he needs to get rid of these legal actions if he can, at least the federal ones. And so Sedna has actually been in his 10th house for a while, and he's been very tenacious about reaching this high office. And that's when he actually achieved it in 2016, but then he lost it in 2020. You see that let's see, get rid of this. See that the Sedna is not just dominating his midheaven, it has been squaring his Mars, but it's really squaring his ascendant right now. And for that matter, the Ingress Mars here at the cusp of the 7th is opposing his Mars and opposing his ascendant for that matter. And so that's one of the most important things you want to see about the Ingress chart here, that is just dominating things. He's desperate. He's having trouble really with being patient and just being determined. I mean, he's got the determination, but he is kind of acting a bit erratic, more erratic than he has been, which is saying a lot. But part of that is the fact of this Maki Quawar square that we've been talking about in Leanne's segments. Maki over here in Libra and Quawar here in Capricorn, but also there's Salacia is part of this this tension. There's really a T-square in cardinal, and it's all focused here on Donald Trump's Mercury in Cancer. In fact, both of Quawar and Maki will get back to exactly square that Mercury. And so that's a great tension. It's making a grand cross. And this is affecting how he's communicating and what his thought processes are and his decision making. And it's really been kind of I mean, I can't get into the list of things that people are being worried about him saying, but you can kind of recall that he's been saying a lot of things that aren't true, making claims that are kind of shocking, like he'd let Putin do whatever they want to any NATO countries who aren't paying their fair share, which is actually all they're doing is making weapons and military investment. They're not paying anybody anything. They're just beefing up their military forces. But it was just a kind of a startling thing to hear. And that's just one of many that just keep coming out in his campaign events. Lesser important, but still interesting, is that Eris has supported his sun stellium through his term and into the time where he was out of office, but now Eris is square his Saturn, is going to be square his Venus, and that's already taken an impact on his business and his finances, as he's now liable for hundreds of millions of dollars in fines from New York State in recent legal action there, which he cannot make go away as president. That's a state charge that has actually already been settled now. So with the Mercury being so under fire, I would also point out that the Ingress Mercury is also square his own Maki. So there's like, one thing after another. There's a kind of a feeding of both Mercuries and Makis from the Ingress to him and outward to the Ingress, which almost seems to underline it, as well as Jupiter being opposite the Ingress. His natal Jupiter is being affected by the Ingress Mercury. It's a lot about what he's saying. That has been the biggest issue that we have seen, and it seems to be going against him with the majority of the American people. Just to quickly look at his progression, which I feel like I like to always look at secondary progression to see if it's being confirmed what I'm seeing in a transit chart. And looking at the progression for November 5th, the election date, we see again a Sedna theme of his progressed sun is actually going to be very closely sesquisquadrate his Sedna. At that pressure that he has to win, and that pressure is very very high. And while he has his progressed moon down here in the third house is sextile his progressed sun in the last months of the campaign, by November 5th, that's going to be sesquisquadrate his natal sun and his Salacia. Semi-square his progressed Salacia. So I think that the confessional type of thing that he does when he's talking to at campaign events and in other media appearances are going to actually go against him with the majority of the Americans. And so it really while he does have incredible support with his fans and his voters, that's not really going to carry everything unless he's going to get inroads in some of the swing states. And that is the concern with people who feel that they don't want him to become president again. I would also point out that Mars being semi-square his ascendant, his progressed Mars being semi-square his ascendant, and his progressed Mercury being conjunct his Mars, both are saying, again, it's things that he's saying, things that he's doing that have caused people to be worried and concerned about how his thinking can be certain ways, and also his actions. And those three things are really the big takeaways from looking at progression and saying, is this saying the same thing as we're seeing in transits? So if with Joe Biden, if Trump looks like he's possibly in trouble overall, do we see that Joe Biden has a chance to win re-election? There's a lot of things being said about him that people are wish that there is somebody younger. What do we see from him at Mars Ingress? And right now, as we, and this has been true for several years throughout his presidency, he's got Neptune trine and Pluto sextile his natal sun Venus. And this has been very empowering for him and lifting him up. And even if there's been a public perception that there's just something wrong. Well, what is that public perception? That's the Sedna that's been opposing his sun Venus for years, even as it was already not doing any exact oppositions as soon as early in his presidency. But Sedna is very slow and very powerful. And part of the Sedna is the constant nagging on coming from Donald Trump. Once he was out of power, he wouldn't let go and kept saying the election was stolen, and he was the real president, and that Joe Biden was a fake president. And this has just never stopped, and that has caused this atmosphere of dissatisfaction among many people, even ones that just aren't paying a lot of attention to politics. So they say, well, why are we dealing with this? But meanwhile, with Pluto and Neptune being in such support, he's got a lot done, and that has been now brought up time and again, and that will that will help him certainly. I will say that you can notice that Mars is now square his natal Sun Venus conjunction, and I think that's because come March, enough primaries are going to be through. We know that these are the two people that are going to be in the election, and the real fight can now begin. In fact, I think there's been a strategy that President Biden has followed to just not pay a lot of attention to Donald Trump while he's been president. He's not going to sit there and constantly be complaining about him, even as Trump is complaining about him. And so now he can take the gloves off and really start. And I would point out that Saturn, as well as Venus, is trine his Mars. He's going to be ready for this. He certainly probably has an appetite for an all-out war of words that's going to come. But I will note that the Pluto Haumea square is actually targeting President Biden's moon. Certainly, he's probably not happy about being unpopular. There's an emotional hit, that emotional toll that probably is taken. But it's also probably that he feels that he has to protect his home, which is to him now as president is his country. It might be as literal home as that he wants to stay in the White House. But those are the important things to look at here. I will say also that as Saturn is clearing out from opposing his Sun stellium completely in the coming years, Uranus and Jupiter are going to be are now opposing his Mars Mercury in Scorpio, and then will continue on to oppose the entire stellium. But I kind of think that's going to energize him and be to his advantage. The Jupiter opposite will definitely be a turning point in his in the last four years for being a Jupiter turning a corner. But even Uranus there, I think it will be along with Neptune, Pluto, a strong and uplifting thing for him. So I think that there's reason to believe that Joe Biden is going to come up to the plate and hit it out. We all have to vote here in America, and nobody should take this as a that they can just sit back and eat Cheetos on election day. You got to go out there. But progression also tells the same story. I would also want you to know his progressed sun and in Aquarius is sextile progressed Sedna. He's also a persevering person and a determined person, and so that's been in orb for a few years, and it's going to be in orb into the next term, I think. But also, this progressed sun is sextile progressed Salacia, which is that let's go and move forward now. We've thought about this enough, and now we can act. So this minor grand trine is a real value of him right here at election day. I think that's a positive. Another big positive that's been around for over a decade is the fact that he has had in progression of retrograde, stationing, and moving forward Mercury that has been sextile his his Venus and Sun in Scorpio. That's been sitting there since 2012, and it's only still moving forward very slowly. What a help that is, as well as trining his Quaoar and being opposite his natal Jupiter. This is why he's always joking and doing so well in his foreign policy with the natal Jupiter involved. That's definitely been a plus, and maybe we'll start to really see it as he goes through this campaign, and starts to be more active and more engaging in campaigning. And the last thing he's has is this very long-term minor grand trine of Eris, Saturn, Pluto. This is formed during his life. It wasn't as distinct whatsoever in his natal, but he has, it's almost as if this is the moment for him to be president rather than when he first tried in the 80s or was considering it in the 2000s. This is the moment where he is someone who can bring together all the countries of Europe, for example, to face Vladimir Putin and have this government uplifting the Ukrainian government and their people and sending them weapons. This thing is been going on for 15 years since his vice presidency, and it's not exact yet. It will not even be exact until like late in the decade. And I'm talking about the exactitude of the Saturn, the progressed Saturn sextile, the progressed Pluto. For somebody who's in government, that's like a safety net of power. And for those reasons, I think this supports what we're seeing in the transit ingress, and it supports him being stronger than Donald Trump looks in his transits and progression.
Can I just jump in? Can you just quickly flick back to that chart, Sue, please?
Yes.
Yeah, because Jupiter's going to ingress Gemini on the 26th of May, and it's going to pass over Joe's descendant, and it's going to trigger that Saturn-Pluto sextile, isn't it?
Yes.
So yes, that's quite favorable, I think.
And that will also be in the double sextile to the other people, the other planets in that minor grand trine too. His Pluto and his it won't be as perfect as it is in progression, but it will be the Pluto's at 7 Leo and the Eris is at 4 Aries, so it will be set off for sure.
Yeah. But Jupiter going through your 7th in an election year is like, you wouldn't complain about it, would you?
No, I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's public facing efforts will be good. Yes,
definitely.
So yeah, I know. It's encouraging. Now, one thing I usually do, as I use more objects like the dwarf planets, so more Plutos, more Plutos actually means there are more things like Pluto out there, and we need to use them. That's why the title of my book. But I also find that using more charts helps you to verify what you're seeing is really there and you're not missing something. And so just to show you briefly, looking at the inaugural charts, for example, of these figures is very helpful to see, what does that look like, for example, at the election day. And Trump was president, so he has an inaugural chart, but that can continue. It doesn't have to just mean this gives you information about the 4 years of him being in office. And so when we see him at November 5th, and I've done this for quite a few presidents. It's really an incredible thing to look at, and I think you see it best when you have dwarf planets in there to give you the density of pixels in your picture that you're getting. You're getting all the correct things that are getting set off by their milestones. But look at this, which is just extraordinary, that his inaugural progressed sun by this next election will be semi-square both his inaugural Mars here at 24 Pisces 21 and his semi-square his inaugural Saturn Ixion in 23 and 25 Sagittarius, and soon will set off a square to the inaugural moon. That doesn't sound so hot, you know. It sounds like there's going to be trouble. And then you have his inaugural, his progressed moon from the inauguration square his ascendant. And I mean, I watched this inauguration, so I got the exact time he was sworn in, and it was 10 seconds after noon. So we're looking at a really accurate chart. And I didn't really enjoy watching that inauguration, but I did it because I wanted that timing. His progressed his progressed moon is also semi-square his inaugural progressed Mars Salacia and Quaoar up here in the progression area, and Quaoar over here. So there's this incredible tension with Mars, Saturn, Quaoar, and an emotional aspect. And for him personally, I think that we're talking about that he's not going to be happy on election day. Not that he's going to say he lost. Where everybody is pretty much bracing with that Maki Quaoar thing and Salacia T-square affecting his Mercury. He's going to be quite vocal, and it's whatever happens, he is going to be the winner, and everyone is kind of prepared for that this time. But it also shows that his progressed Saturn in the oath chart is also square progressed Venus as well, which is kind of reminiscent of the fact that he's got those $100 million that he's owing through legal action, and that's going to have to drag him down, as the months wear on in the campaign. So what's really interesting is that actually comes due, to be exact, in September 2025, which is a date that is I'm going to be mentioning later, which I'd like you to recall. He's going to be unhappy about that too, and it's not just because the money will come out, because I think he's really has to put up that money relatively soon, but he's going to feel like he's lost something very much in September of 2025 as well. But just to move on from there, see, I think I have to press the screen to work. With the Biden inaugural chart, to progress that to November 5th is also looks more promising as an inaugural chart progressed to that election than Donald Trump's. The sun is going to be passing Saturn during the end of the campaign, and we're going to be getting used to the fact of people trying to make a big deal about him being old. But after that passes, all you're going to be seeing is the sextile to Salacia and Chiron, where he is talking about how he is compassionate towards the American people and their pain and their needs, and that he wants to do more for them. He wants us to move forward. All of those are going to be good messages, and I think that he will be talking a lot about the fact that we need to make things better, and that's the semi-square to Neptune and Ceres. We need better things for people economically, and we need a general better keep improving healthcare, and those things he'll admit that needs to happen, and that will be a plus for him. But also, I think that the progressed sextile between Mercury and Aries is he's connecting with the people in general, And the fact that that same progressed Mercury is sesquisquadrate Maki-Maki, he will still make gas and have problems speaking publicly, which has been true. He's actually was a stutterer as a young man, but he is that likable oddball. I think that he has presented that to us, all along, even as a vice president. And those are things that are going to be married to the fact that he has gotten a lot done, even with the Republican House during his presidency, that he can continue still working with the Republicans and getting things done. Those are definitely good, and those are the takeaways that most important things that I thought visiting the inaugural charts would give me. And so now back to Leanne again.
Got it. Okay. So, what I wanted to talk about next was obviously the situation in Israel, which we know is, sort of taking up a lot of the news, isn't it? But before we start actually looking at the chart, I just want to think back to October last year, October the 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel. And at the time, Mars was building to a conjunction with Haumea, which exacted a few days later on the 12th of October at 0 Scorpio. And the last time that happened was 1769. Okay. There was several conjunctions in between Mars and Scorpio, which began in 1744, and that period coincided with the likes of the British Empire in India, the colonization of America, the 7 Years' War, and the European superpowers were fighting in Europe and the Americas, and the American Revolution was beginning, and Captain Cook was exploring New Zealand. So it was very much about exploration and fighting for ownership of land, and we're seeing it again with the terrible events in Israel. And it was the very worst manifestation of Mars and Haumea and Scorpio. It's brutal death and destruction. And if you think to Haumea's myth, where she repeatedly gives birth to babies from various parts of her body, at the time, the reports for the babies being brutally slaughtered by Hamas was so resonant with that. But of course, at the time, that Mars-Haumea conjunction at 0 Scorpio opposed Biden's moon at 0 Taurus. So it was setting out straight away that he was going to be a key player in the Israel situation, without a doubt. So, that Mars Haumea conjunction is going to repeat a further 15 times until 2048. So it's not to be underestimated. The next one will be in September 2025. And it's going to activate the Pluto Haumea square again, which will be exact in September 2025 as well. So it's all about those issues of power and control and ownership of land and nations and territory. And of course, Taurus is the opposite sign to Scorpio, so it's about the resources and security provided by the land. And Mars and Scorpio, along with Haumea, at its worst, can be vengeful and ruthless. And it comes from a real primal place of survival, I think. Kill or be killed, fight or die, an eye for an eye. And I think that was very much reflected in Israel's response to the Hamas attack, coming from that very instinctive, brutal, revengeful place, utter destruction, really, that we've seen. And of course, on the 7th of October, transit Uranus was conjunct Israel's sun. So it very much described the unexpected nature of the attack, I think, and it's perhaps why the leadership, Netanyahu, retaliated in such an impulsive manner and continues to do so. But if we look at the Ingress chart relocated for Israel, okay, it's really quite interesting. So we've got Neptune, Pisces rising on the ascendant there, and we've got Neptune rising in front of that Aries stellium. So I wonder if that gives some hope of peace before aggression, or some form of the aggression being tempered down, perhaps. but that Saturn Orcus opposition that we have going on falls right across the ascendant of this relocated chart, which I think's really interested. And I think that plays out on a few different levels. It's very much about cleansing Hamas out of Gaza from Israel's perspective. You know, Gaza being laid to waste, all the victims, the destruction, the loss, you know. But with AUKUS on the descendant there, I was just wondering, it's going to be about rules perhaps and bringing some order. And I wonder if this is perhaps going to be some international sanction or international ruling or order, or you know, something like that. So I just thought that chart as a standalone was quite interesting. But what's interesting, I use Juno a lot, and I know we're talking about dwarf planets tonight, but I have to mention this because Juno is going to be moving to eventually catch up with Orcus there. And Juno's actually making 3 oppositions with Saturn, which I think are very important, and they're triggering that Saturn Orcus opposition, which is kind of the bigger picture. So the first time Juno opposed Saturn was 19th of October last year. Okay, on that very date, Biden announced humanitarian aid would enter Gaza, and the US would provide 100 million in aid for Palestinian civilians. And Israel and Egypt agreed to let 20 trucks of food and water and medicine into Gaza. And that promise came because health officials, Virgo, warned of like an escalating humanitarian crisis, which is very much Saturn and Pisces. We're coming up to the second opposition in March, and the news at the minute is suggesting that talks are basically, they're suggesting that there could be a 6-week ceasefire coming at any time now. And I bet $1 million, okay, if we do get that ceasefire as promised, it will coincide with that second opposition of Juno and Saturn. Juno very much acts like a benefic. She's a problem solver, and she helps sort things out and mediate, and definitely has a benefic influence. So I just, you know, that date's so close and it's right before the ingress. I just thought I really wanted to mention that, because it's about the collective responsibility to protect the people of the world and people in need, which is a very Pisces thing, helping the victims. So Juno here, I think, is going to help build some bridges. It's about cooperation and aid and welfare. So I couldn't not mention that. Okay. But let's look at the bi-wheel for the Israel chart and the Aries ingress, which is quite interesting. So we've got that fixed T-square that I'm obviously quite obsessed with, how Maya Pluto and that out of bounds moon. Let's not forget that ingress moon is out of bounds. It's acting out of character. It can be a bit wild, and we just don't know, do we? And it's picking up the Israel moon. All right. Yeah. There's going to be pressure from the people, without a doubt. The public mood is not happy with the government. You know, you can sort of scan across a load of different news channels. The people of Israel do not want what's going on.
They want their hostages back.
Of course they do. And
I mean, you know, really.
Yeah, they do. And Moon Pluto, it is about the hostages, the use of control to keep the people separate from their families, and, you know, all that Pluto kidnapping and taking them down to Hades, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure here, without a doubt. And again, I wonder if there's going to be some sort of female in a position of power, perhaps. I'm not sure, but it's certainly going to be about the mood of the people, without a doubt, and, you know, the family dynamics there. Maki there, I know it's retrograde now and separating from the Israel Neptune, but it will be coming back, and it, you know, it's within orb. It's very, very close to that Neptune there. And I wonder if that's about, you know, the shocking number of victims and the sacrifice. But I do wonder if at some point there might just be a shock white flag somehow, or just a shock peace resolution, or peace offer. You're a lot more tuned into Maki than me, Sue.
I perhaps you know what I'm worried. I'm thinking more. It's the people haven't learned enough about what Netanyahu did and why he acted the way he has. I think there's a scandal in there, and it's just been put off, and that's the Neptune. That the scandal is coming when why did he give money to or allow money to be sent to Hamas for so many things, lots of money, and why was the response? Why weren't the borders secured better? Why did they, spend rely so much on automatic security, which failed? So
Yeah,
there's so much there that's some and but it's being pushed off because Netanyahu doesn't want to
yeah.
have any investigation.
Well, that's it, and it's very 12th house. There's a double 12th house Neptune whammy there, and there will be secrets as well. And one of the big questions was, how were they caught by surprise? They had let their boundaries down without a doubt, without a
And I
doubt.
think they heard that there was going to be some. They saw them being practicing. Why was that ignored? So there's so much to be asked. Questions that need to be answered.
There is, but I think there will be shocks coming out at some point with that,
Yes.
without a doubt, definitely. What else did we have in this chart that caught my attention? Yeah, of course we've got that Jupiter Uranus. That's building, heading towards the Israel sun in the spring. We're definitely going to have a breakthrough of some kind, whether there's a change to the leadership. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a change in leadership. But we also have Ixion, or you call it Exion, don't you, Sue? Opposite that natal Venus, which I found quite interesting. I don't know if I've got, or I haven't got that marked up. So again, it's across that third, ninth axes. It's going to be about international communications and relations, without a doubt. And I just think, again, there's going to be more international pressure, and some form of change of values, without a doubt. And of course, I don't know, finances always come in with Venus, don't they? So we're going to see something there, but I think there's going to be some international intervention at some point. So then I wanted to look at the chart of Netanyahu with the Aries Ingress. And I haven't got his progressed chart here, but I thought it's interesting to note he will have a progressed full moon in October, which is probably going to be when he's at the peak of his power, or culmination of something like that. Anyway, that'll be at 13 Cancer in October. So he's coming up to a nodal return at the Aries Ingress there, very close to that nodal return, and just sort of bigging up all that Aries energy, of course. But it's going to be, start of a new sort of 18-year cycle for him. And that's actually opposite his natal Ixion and Neptune. So again, it could be about all those secrets and scandals, that nodal axis return triggering that. I don't know if we'll see something come out then. What else do we have? So you have that Jupiter Uranus conjunction that is sort of building and triggering his Pluto Haumea conjunction. And I know that Pluto Haumea conjunction is a very generational thing. Everyone born around that same time has it, so, but it's certainly going to be about a build-up of pressure and power. And I think Jupiter Uranus together can be wonderful, but I think in their extreme forms, especially when they're tied into a perhaps despotic stellium of Mars, Haumea, and Pluto, it could be about those fanatical beliefs, that the refusal to change, or the sort of going over the top with the use of power. It could be a little bit explosive, perhaps. But I do wonder again if there could be some form of legal surprise or international sanction going on here. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. And then that oops, yeah, Orcus on natal Saturn. We've been talking about that a lot, and that's picking up his Saturn half return.
That's where I was looking for legal. I had just
Yeah,
unmuted to say that, and there came your arrow.
I jumped ahead of myself because I knew there was a big ninth house theme that I was coming to, which sort of echoed that Jupiter theme there. Yeah, this is about rules. I think there's going to be some legal sanctions without a doubt. And I was feeling that from the Israel bi-wheel, and I just think it's being echoed here again. So yeah, and then we've got Maki on his Mercury, picking up that cardinal square to Quawa, and we know he's made some shocking decisions, Netanyahu. Mercury's his thinking process. It's been quite shocking. It's like you watch the news and you're just seeing more and more victims and in Gaza, and just this intent to cleanse it. It's almost like some form of ethnic cleansing what he's doing in Gaza, isn't it? And what we consider really shocking decisions and thinking. So we can see his Mercury and his thought processes have been triggered by Maki, probably in the most shadow form, So and obviously Maki's there for a while. It's a slow moving planet, so we're going to see that carrying on, aren't we? But yeah, I think we're going to have to kind of wait to the spring and see what Jupiter and Uranus trigger. I think that's going to be a bit of a turning point, perhaps. Might implode or explode or just blow it all wide open. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's shades of Donald Trump with his Mercury being affected by the
Yeah,
Maki Quawar.
they're quite similar people in some ways. They're quite similar.
Yes,
Yeah.
and good friends and supporters of one
Mhm.
another. It's just I am also worried about the Pluto Haumea and with what's happening in Taurus. I mean, that's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
very close to where Putin's Pluto Haumea are, right in that
yeah,
area. So, both of these guys are acting with impunity at this point.
yeah,
I mean, certainly the Hamas attack was terrible, but part of the terribleness of it was designed to set off the Israelis to do just what they're doing, so they would go too far. I mean, I think there's been a concerted effort exactly to do this type of thing. Not that really excuse what happened. It's a terrible situation, but there's going to be more and more calls for control and for
yeah.
a drawdown and some sort of uh, reset.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's what we're going to see with the Jupiter Uranus. But I do think that that Haumea stellium there of Netanyahu with Mars, it's like it's volcanic. And absolutely, it's full of anger and full of rage, and it's potentially incredibly destructive, probably on even more of a level than we've already seen. So yeah, I think whether he's forced to, by legal means to sort of relinquish some power, or whether he just that Jupiter Uranus feeds the volcano even more, we'll just perhaps have to wait and see. I don't know. Yeah. Um, so there was just one more chart I wanted to look at there. So this was which one's this? Sorry. There we go. So this was the tri-wheel with Israel, Netanyahu, and the Aries Ingress. Because we can just get a clear picture there of Maki Maki on Netanyahu's Mercury, which is on top of Israel's Neptune. So I think you're bang on with the scandal and the secrets. Yeah. And the intrigue there. I really do think bang on, Sue. And then we can see Netanyahu's AUKUS on Israel's Uranus. And he's completely obsessed with bringing about, disruption, whether that's conscious or subconscious, I really don't know, but certainly an incredibly disruptive force. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of look at the sort of slightly
and his
there.
Uranus on Israel's Venus. I mean, it's a further disruption.
Yeah. Absolutely, he's an incredibly disruptive force.
It's making them look terrible. The decisions he's made has made the Israeli government look terrible, and the people, are suffering for that too.
Yeah, very much. The people don't want this, and that's what I was saying before about the pressure coming from within. I think I think there's probably going to be international sanctions, but I think there's going to be more, if at least, or if not more, pressure coming from within Israel for change. So, yeah, fascinating. Anyway, I'll pass back to you, Sue.
All right. So in this country, in the United States, we are really worried about the fate of reproductive rights after the overturn of Roe versus Wade. And one way we can see what's might be going to happen with that is by looking at people who, looking through the eyes of people who have a stake in what's going to occur. And so what I thought is, let's look at the president of Planned Parenthood and see what she is feeling at this moment, and it's very interesting. Looking at her Aries Ingress transits coming up, it's interesting to see that she's not without difficulties, in the sense that Neptune of the Ingress over here in the 8th house, and I don't have a time for her, so we can't depend on the house system to give us information. But with the dwarf planets, we get more information that we can worry less about losing the house system as a clue for things. But this Neptune is sesquisquadrate. Her Sun, Maki Maki, and Mercury stellium. Eventually, I'll get to Mercury as well. And that shows that this uncertainty, as well as Mars being opposite her natal Mars. Nerves, uncertainty, and the anger as well. But certainly the Neptune thing says, what's going to happen? She's asking the same questions we are. But I will take some some comfort in that fact that the Ingress Mercury, Charon, and North Node is trine her stellium. So I think, unbeknownst to her, it looks like there might be good news coming. Certainly the Jupiter, Ingress Jupiter square her Sun Maki Maki is a career turn, and also maybe traveling, opportunity to appear here, there, and everywhere. I've seen her on television multiple times, as all these things have been playing out. But those are the best things that I see here, that while she has her doubts, she is working hard. In fact, I will say that the Maki Maki Quawar Salacia T-square is semi-square and sesquisquadrate her Mars. And that's more of an irritation, of course, the semi-square sesquisquadrate position. I mean, it can be a real harsh irritation, because it's also long lasting. These are all very slow and all that, but that I'm sure she's being pelted with all the stories of how people are having problems. They needed an abortion to preserve their fertility because they had a medical issue, or they were almost in a dire situation with an ectopic pregnancy. All of those things that she's being forced to having to know about and hear about, she can turn around and use that to get to the people that need to know about these problems to vote in certain ways as we get to an election, but also to pressure their legislators to make some changes in the law so that we don't depend on a Supreme Court decision that could be overturned. So I see positive things there, and also looking at her progression, just to look at the most important things is around the time of Roe versus Wade, she actually had progressed Sun conjunct Pluto, and that was squared her progressed Jupiter. I mean, that's kind of incredible power, which when you suddenly have everything against you, you have something to talk about, and people want you to talk about it. And so that's what was the positive upside of that debacle that happened 2 years ago. Now progressed Mercury is semi-square natal Mars. Here we see that, and so she's up for the fight. But I will point out now that 2 years later, we have progressed Sun is now here in the second house of this chart. We can't use the second house, but we can at least, so I can see where I am. Oh, shoot. As I'm trying to find my cursor, is sextile Neptune. I really think that that's a positive for something about to happen that might be really welcomed, not just in the United States, but even outward, because if we start drawing back on making, say, the medical abortion pill mifepristone, that will affect more than just the United States. At least that was my understanding. So I think that maybe there's a chance that the Supreme Court decision that's now pending on whether they're going to remove the FDA approval will not succeed, and maybe it will be left alone. And that's what I get out of looking at her progression. I think there's reason to be very positive about that sextile with Neptune. Look, I also thought, well, let's look at somebody who would be happy if this new status quo was maintained. And one way of looking at that is to see how some of the conservative justices in the Supreme Court would be reacting. We don't have any exact times for any of them, but I just picked Samuel Alito just out of thin air to say, well, let me look at him, and I saw enough there that I felt he would be pretty not happy, pretty irritated and disappointed, because his sun is at 11 Aries, and he is caught up in the Maki Quaoar Salacia T-square. He's had his say with Salacia, and now has to hear all of the shock, surprise, and negativity from all the people that are not in favor of what he has decided with his conservative justices, because 70%, it's something like 70% of the American people were not looking for having abortion outlawed in the United States. And while they have been saying, oh, well, if we take it off of federally, the states will make their own decision. That seems to be off the table too, as these now they're saying that Donald Trump has suggested some sort of limitations, at least for federally. So I think that we could be safe to say that Samuel Alito is not going to be happy, especially with Mars approaching semi-square sesquisquadrate his natal, this Mars here with his natal Mercury opposite Ixion. And I'm even wondering why he has Mercury opposite Ixion as a Supreme Court justice, because that means that his thinking is very rebellious, very, very not non-conservative, and not supporting of the received law. But I think even more so is the fact that transiting Saturn is opposing his natal Saturn. So that's not, you don't get what you want when that's happening. Jupiter is trying that's his natal Saturn. He should go on vacation. I think that'll really be more of a help to him to deal with what's about to happen this spring. And I think that progression also kind of says the same thing, because I always had to check that, of course, as I was mentioning. His progressed sun is conjunct, going to be conjunct his natal Orcus, and soon after that, the progressed Orcus, and sesquus quadrate progressed the natal Gong. So I think that, you know, on one hand, these decisions that he's made in the execution of his job have really hit a nerve in American voters' heart, for the most part, for the majority of them. But I also think that he's going to be himself oversensitive about his future decisions, and so I think progression does show that. And also progressed Mercury here is sesquisquadrate progressed Ixion, which I think is kind of funny that in transit we also see an effect to his Mercury opposite Ixion. And so secondary progression. Those are my two takeaways. I think that are saying that he's not going to be a happy camper, even as he has with Sun sextile Sedna. He's probably really trying to hunker down and let these things blow over, and that probably will work for some period of time. But his progressed Sun is moving towards square his natal Mars, and a few years on, and after that to progress Mars, but that's way far in the future. But I do think that that's going to cause more problems, hopefully during his retirement. But I did look also at Roe versus Wade when it was decided, and did a progression for that to first to look to see if the Roe overturn was shown, and I think it really was, that when the progressed Sun came to 22 Pisces, it was just leaving the trine to Orcus, which it was settled law, and now suddenly it's sesquisquadrate Ixion. It's unsettled. It's now broken law. I thought that was just incredible, where to encapsulate how people felt. Everybody was taken so much by surprise, even those that I think were really worried about what was going to happen with all this excess of conservative justices. I think they a lot of people were saying, I don't really think this is going to go well. But for the most people, this was just a shocker. And also in this chart, the progressed Venus is a square progressed and the Roe Saturn. So that's where women in relationships all over the country were saying, "Oh my God, this is what's going to happen." I mean, I can't be certain about anything right now. And also, the other thing that's really come up very, very strongly about with the in vitro fertilization is the same Venus is also square progress Ceres on the other side. And I think Ceres as a mother figure, but not your mother, is almost representative of the things that we're doing now in order to create motherhood scientifically. It's not a natural process, not a moon process, but it's something which it simulates it. and in the service to women. And that's now a threat. You will see that just the original row. This is important. Just in what I'm going to show you next is a Sun Salacia thing in Aquarius, where women finally are heard. They finally kind of move forward, have more control over their life. And what is it? It's trine Pluto in Libra. What a perfect vision of control for at the time this law was decided. But now look at when we're expecting this Mephipristone decision, which could give some cause for optimism for the future of reproductive rights. And what we have is I think the most persuasive thing to show you really, and to get right to the heart of the matter, is that the progressed moon for this decision is now by June going to be going past opposition to the rho Sun Salacia. So I think there's going to be the worry and concern when that's exact, in a month or two. But after that, it is I was looking at this for the end of the term, near the end of the Supreme Court term. But I think by May, when it sextiles the progressed Pluto and then by June sextiles the rho Pluto, that will mean a positive verdict by the end of the term. I think that will be an incredible boost to people and a little sigh of relief that and I think there's a lot of reasons to think that this will. I mean, if they're going to then define embryo that should not be considered a child as one that's not inside the womb. Certainly the operation of mephipristone, which operates so early in the process, might be considered not necessarily taking affecting an embryo that has not gotten to its place in the womb at the time that it's operated against. I mean, but I feel like really they're now making such excuses about how they're going to define what kind of embryo it is, and I do think that this is bound to fail. They're just thinking about life in too early a stage, and that's why I heard one woman on television saying, an embryo really is the promise of a child. It is not yet a child. And she was a person who has gone through in vitro fertilization. And I think she was speaking from the heart and was much more even scientifically accurate, if you want to put it that way. So mifepristone, once it was approved, I also did look at that chart and looked at the progression to the end of the Supreme Court justice thing and Supreme Court decision time. And I thought, again, of all these things that I have here noted down to look for, let's just look at the fact that the progressed Venus Ixion sextile, the progressed and natal Neptune, sorry, that to me says that there's something to be again hoped for in not banning mifepristone. Again, similar to that progressed Sun Neptune sextile in the Planned Parenthood president's chart. I thought that was very similar. And now we'll talk about the Ukraine-Russia war, or Putin's war, as so many call it. It's very accurately. Again, we have to look through the people involved in order to see what's going on and if there's any hope that there's going to be a resolution. And let's start first with Vladimir Putin's chart. I do have one caveat here, though. I don't use the 1952 Vladimir Putin chart because as I was I don't know why, but I felt very dissatisfied with his chart and was looking around to see provenance, see who was the one that provided it. It was supposedly a government official. And I happened on a very strange story about a woman in Georgia, and I'm talking about Georgia, the country, who claimed since 2000 that she is Vladimir Putin's mother, Vera Putina, her name is, and she had to give him up at age 9 because the man she married as he was when Vladimir was just a little boy didn't like the young kid and wanted him to get out of the home. They were uh, having conflict, and she was caught between her husband and her son, and sadly she gave up her son and she sent them to relatives in Russia, who were also named Putin. Now, the only thing is he spoke Georgian, so he had to learn Russian. And what the family decided is to put him back a few grades, and then to do that more easily with the government, they told them that his birth chart was his birth certificate rather was wrong. It had a typo, and he was really born in 1950. And so this is all online, and you can even read on my website in my articles area this article I wrote for the Astrological Association's journal.
It's excellent.
About this 1950 chart and how it does work with big milestones in his life, like how upset he was at the fall of the Berlin Wall, and how upset he was when he was adopted, when he had to leave his mother. She even in video not only talked about his real birthday, but also her own birthday. So I was able to actually take her birthday and make comparisons with his milestones, his early milestones. So I feel very confident that this is the chart of Putin. It works very well, but I wanted to warn you, this is different from what you've been seeing. If you're just looking at astro.com, or even any other person publishing charts on Vladimir Putin. So to look at his chart now, what's happening at Aries Ingress is Sedna is sesquisquadrate his natal sun. If you remember, that was kind of like what was happening with Trump in progression. And this has been happening in transit with him for years. In fact, it's been the years of him not having his buddy Trump in the White House, and where he's now decided, crazily enough, that he's going to invade Ukraine because there are Nazis there. I mean, that's just insane to even think people are going to believe that, but sadly some do. But now, while that's been going on and it's now kind of getting out of that sesquisquadrate position, he's got other problems because the south node is coming for him. I mean, I show the north node here, but that means the south node is over in this area. And so that is going to be a little bit of a karmic lesson for him. But as well, Maki and Quawar and Salacia are gearing up to configure his sun in these few years coming. They're actually affecting his Uranus in a Grand Cross in transit. But I also think that the fact that Saturn is square and an Eris sesquisquadrant, I'm sorry, his own Mars. His Mars is here in Sagittarius, and it's not a very well positioned Mars. It's sesquisquadrate Maki and sesquisquadrate Sedna. This is not a great military leader, as we now know, right? But Saturn has been square his Mars, and now an Eris sesquisquadrate, and everyone's against him except the poor Russian people who are kind of caught in the middle. So governments are against him. The people in general, Aries as other people in general, are can't believe that this is still going on, and because he's just hanging in there. He's only been lucky lately because they've run out of weapons because of money and budget things in our own Congress to have been stalling things. But I will say that Mars has been conjunct as Jupiter. That's the recent luck, but it is sesquiquadrate his Sun and will also his Ixion and Neptune in the near future after the ingress, into April. So I think what this all means is, especially in the short term, is things will get moving in Congress. This money will get going. There's just no reason for things to not improve. But I think also Neptune here at 27 has been opposing his natal Mercury Saturn, and that which is itself square Orcus. I mean, he's a definite authoritarian, which is another one of the dark sides of Orcus. And there's a scandal to that. So we'll have to see what happens with that. It's just a matter of time, I think, really. And I even know that time. So we'll get to that. But there's what the state of him at Aries Ingress. And the secondary, this is the time that I'm thinking is what we should be looking for. September 1st or thereabouts in 2025. Remember, I said Trump would not have a good time in September 2025. Here's where I think he's also going to be sad, because I think he depends a lot on Vladimir Putin. Maybe he thinks he'll get his hundreds of millions of dollars back from Vladimir if he can get elected to another term. But in the summer of 2025, I think we see in progression, he is not going to be very happy whatsoever, as at that point, his Sun Pallas conjunction in progression is going to be square his natal Mercury Saturn, and very close to start the square of his progressed Saturn. And I think at this point, at some point he's going to give up. It might say, I just don't have, it's going to pass it off as just a decision because he's it's a whim of his, not because he's in serious trouble. But if you look at his progressed moon at the time, I think the semi-square to this Grand Cross in Uranus, progressed Grand Cross in Uranus, Quawar, Venus, and Eris is going to be what is really and it also squares his stellium, especially Haumea in Leo. I think this is going to be the some straw that breaks the camel's back. Maybe the drones will actually blow up the Kremlin. I don't know the details. Like we never know the actual details. We just know, oh boy, this is going to be something else, or so there's smooth sailing here. This is basically, I think, we know general departments of life usually, but I think this is what's going to come up, just not soon enough for anybody, which is the sad part of it. And anyway, that's the big takeaways from his secondary progression here. Now, how about Zelensky? Do we see that Zelensky is going to similarly on the other side of it show some positive future in his endeavors? And I think the answer is yeah. And the beautiful thing about Zelensky is we have a firm birth chart. He was a celebrity and on television in Ukraine. So somebody asked somebody and got his birth certificate. So we know we can depend on this chart. And his as we see it coming down, Pluto is now moving into his sun sign, and by the time it starts to get into very close to his Sun and Venus conjunction, that's when there's going to be the sextile with Neptune. Neptune will have moved into Aries. Sedna is moving into Gemini, as well as Jupiter will be in there by next year. And the little minor grand trine with Pluto and Neptune and Uranus. Sedna, actually, they're going to be in early Gemini together. That's going to be quite benefic for Vladimir Zelensky. He does have Mercury that's ostensibly going to be in the middle of the T square with Salacia and Makimaki Quawar, but Quawar will be conjuncted. Maybe he'll play himself in the movie, which like Audie Murphy did for his World War II exploits. He's, I mean, I can just see that happening. But basically, Saturn is coming up to sextile his natal Mercury. So I think that's when, he's going to get all that government support, not just from US, but the EU has secured a lot of money for them. Which is coming. But more than anything, Jupiter being trine his Mercury at the ingress shows that it's all is not lost. Things sound dire right now, but next month in ingress, it's going to start looking good for him in transit wise. But let's look at that September. Why am I talking about September 2025? Well, it's only because all of this other stuff seems to be going so right for Vladimir Zelensky. And that's because his progressed sun at that point is at 23 Pisces, sextile his moon at 23 Taurus, trine his Mars at 23 Cancer. And that minor grand trine, I look at that and all I see is a leader, beloved of his people, a military leader, who has prosecuted a war against the Russian government and Vladimir Putin with all his money, and he's been getting away with it. And so, the only question was, how long is he getting away with it? And then you see this coming up in 2025. And when I saw this in 2022 and started talking about it to people, nobody really, one, they couldn't believe it, and two, they were really upset it was so far in the future. But now this is just a little over a year from now, so it's a lot more palatable. But not just that, but his Mercury Venus conjunction in progression is sextile his Sun Venus in natal. I just think this guy who has actually got Sun square Sedna, right? The most difficult natal thing to have, and yet he needed it for someone to be faced with such odds and say, we are going to do this thing, we are going to survive and do it. Because that's the beauty of Sedna. Even if you have the square or opposition or conjunction in your chart, you have great power, great endurance, and great faith to get through things. And it's all in one package. Mm-hmm. So this is why I'm so adamant that you need to start looking at Sedna. But his progressed natal Jupiter is sitting in his ascendant, and it's going to stay there. And even there, you have something good to say. It's persistently sextile Saturn there in the third. I just, I can't get enough of this guy. And so just very happy to be able to pass it on to you that you need to say a prayer for him and the Ukrainian people. But those prayers look like they're going to be answered.
Yeah, I think that looks really positive. And when we look back at the ingress chart, could you just flip back to the ingress chart there?
Sure.
So I was just looking at transit Pluto, because obviously it's been opposing his Mars for a while.
Yes.
So it very much describes the battle and the war and the violence and what have you. And obviously,
and the Haumea there, and Haumea was doing that too to his Mars.
It's caught up in that really volcanic square between Pluto and Haumea. And Pluto's still going to be triggering his Mars for a while yet. But then once Pluto moves into Aquarius for good in November and then starts moving into Aquarius, it's going to move away from that Mars. And it's going to sort of be well away from that Mars or further away in September 2025. So I think some of that Mars Pluto pressure is going to be coming off. And I think when Pluto conjoins his Sun and Venus, which is going to be back end of what, 2025, something like that, or even sooner than that, he's going to be more empowered, without a doubt.
Yes,
without a doubt.
I
That
know.
all ties in. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because again, I kind of was not looking backwards at this point, but that's very important to say. How could this man, have these things coming up, and he's been so unlucky, but it's been that Mars being under fire from Pluto Haumea. I think of all the people who have died he feels responsible. And yet he has to press on. And that's where that sedna comes through, is where you just you just have to keep gritting your teeth and continuing. And not many people can do that.
No.
True. So yeah, again, I was just just to briefly say, the inauguration charts work. And when you look at Putin, his inauguration progressed sun is sesquiquadrate natal Saturn. Right down here in the fifth house, and he's coming up with a sun conjunct Sedna in his progressed chart. And I don't know if he's going to be a determined person to be able to handle that personally. He seems to be a person who doesn't really have a lot of patience. His progressed Mercury will be semi-square progressed Neptune, right here, and there's the Neptune, which it kind of echoes the Neptune opposite his Mercury opposition in the Ingress chart, the transit. And there's certainly a lot of scandal going on, in fact, that he misled his people. But I think that the one thing the inaugural chart seems to indicate is that he might actually escape justice. It'd be great if he just disappeared, of course, just get him out of Russia and not in control. But look how his progressed Venus is exactly to the minute trine progressed Haumea at September 1, 2025. Since he's got billions and billions and billions of dollars, he's got the money to escape justice, I guess. But with his progressed Mars at the same time square, very painfully square, that progressed Uranus, it might be that he's being, bicycled out on in a basket in order to get out fast enough in some crazy way. because that doesn't look good. This
quite
looks good for the
quite explosive, Mars and Uranus together, and that Venus trine Haumea is the easy way out. He might just go very easily and quickly.
Well, maybe it's really hard to figure out how that all fits together. That's I'll give you that. But Zelensky also was inaugurated, and he's got his progressed sun is sextile Salacia Charon. And even though it's sesquisquadrate Saturn, I feel confident that his sesquisquadrate to Saturn is, once this thing is all over, he's got a lot of work to do. So he's got a ton of work to do to, recover where his country was beforehand, to restore everything. But his progressed moon, Gong, is sextile Uranus. Square the sun, he'll have a lot of bad days to get back to things, but trine Mars. So all that to me is supportive in my mind. And go back to Biden's inauguration. Here's a guy who has really banked his presidency on supporting Ukraine. If Ukraine goes down, this is going to be terrible news for President Biden, and whether he's in office or not. But so what does that say at September 1st, 2025? the progressed Saturn is conjunction with the progressed Sun is going to be in the past. That'll be all that nasty election he went through. But now in a forward, it's progressed Jupiter, and the event Jupiter is at 7. That's coming up. But also that sextile's there, and but there is the square to Mars and Uranus. So maybe there'll be certain people that are still, that might be a totally other different threat if Trump is still sounding off that the election was again stolen from him. Who knows? But looking at this moon at Gemini at that point, trine progressed Eris and trine progressed Mercury. There's a nice figure that says something nice is going to happen at the beginning of September. Something is that he's going to be generally pleased and energized by. So Venus also sextile Neptune. So there's going to be general happiness. Maybe a happiness that our money was spent well, and it wasn't really, in a sense, a lot of it. The money wasn't money; it was military equipment that had already been, paid for, and then there were American companies that were going to resupply us, and they were going to make money. So there was actually when you think of the actual expenditure, it was a very, very small amount of our budget that went into what we did for you and are doing for Ukraine. There's even the personal progression of Biden. It looks good. It's soon after the election. It always already was looking good. But the Salacia sextiles now exact, and his progressed moon is sextile Venus trine Mars. It's opposing his natal Mars, but it's also sextile Maki. I think, and square Haumea. I mean, they've gone through a lot of changes, and a lot of effort's been taken care of, but there's so much good there. There's actually, in a few months after this, the sextile to Jupiter, which could be, the continuing feeling that, Europe is now secure. I mean, Finland and Sweden have joined NATO, and they're going to end up, if Ukraine can make it through, then they're going to join NATO, and they're going to lock up Europe and security. I can't believe they got Hungary to come through on that. So I think things are looking good for Ukraine, and God willing, we'll see 2025 come quickly.
Yeah, and then of course, if we move into spring 2026, we'll have the new Saturn Neptune conjunction beginning in 0 degrees of Aries. So we'll be moving into a new era without a doubt, I think. Yeah.
That'll be an interesting Aries Ingress time.
Oh, I know 2026 is going to be interesting because Uranus will move into Gemini, of course, as well. It's going to be very air fire, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's when we're going to see a big change up in a lot of ways, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, that was fascinating. We got through a lot there, Sue. We got through an awful lot.
Well, we're carrying the world on our shoulders. These are the big problems. I mean, there's certainly more problems in the world, but these fill up the news streams, and
they're the headlines.
It's on people's minds. I constantly getting texts from girlfriends saying, "Oh no," on this and that.
But everything we talked about tonight has an effect on us personally, or a potential effect on us, so it's not just something that happens behind a TV screen. It does have very real effects on resources, the flow of food and transport and currency and the cost of fuel, and so it does affect us all. So thank you very much for sharing all that. Yeah, without a doubt.
Thank you for the work you do too, and I especially was glad to hear about what's going on with King Charles, and I had hadn't looked at the astrology in depth of Israel and Hamas or
Yeah.
China and Taiwan. So I mean, I like that update myself.
Yeah, I mean, I just scratched the surface this evening, to be honest, but because all of those are just warrant a webinar or all to themselves,
They do. It's very
Yeah, of
hard. You could do a whole thing on any of these
course
subjects
you
and
could,
really dig
of
in.
course.
And that's why, I mentioned doing a lot of charts because that's how I was able to pinpoint
Yeah,
the Donald Trump's first impeachment. I don't know if I meant to mention that, and I'm not sure even if I did, but I used the not only transits and progression, but I used the USA chart and the oath chart for Donald Trump, and I mean and his vice president chart, because I figured if he had to leave office or was in danger of leaving office, you have to see Mike Pence looking like Gerald Ford when Nixon left office.
yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
all of those helped me get zero
Yeah, of
in
course.
on this September
Yeah.
22nd, 2019, like over a year and a half beforehand.
Mhm.
So that's why I
Yeah.
use a lot of charts. It might seem tedious, but it really helps you get down to the real spot
You're
to say
compiling
this is the
evidence.
prediction.
Absolutely. And they'll all give you recurring evidence, supportive evidence. Yeah, yeah, definitely the way to
Yeah.
do it. So wonderful.
Mhm.